The riches of Spain. A young boy stands in a dark cave. A heavy sack leans against his bare legs. Beneath his feet, he feels damp, slick clay and rough ridges of stone. Sweat runs down his face. Ahead of him, dim torchlight flickers in the blackness. The hollow sound of metal picks hacking away at mountain rock rings through the dark. He turns around and sees a tunnel sloping sharply up toward a faraway gleam of daylight. He bends down to lift the sack. Needle-edged pieces of stone jut through its rough sides and scrape against his arms and back. He starts to struggle up the tunnel, bent almost double by the weight and gasping for breath. But the air is so warm and foul that he can barely pull it into his lungs. He isn't much older than you, and he works in a South American mine collecting gold for Philip II, the King of Spain. The Spanish came to South America the very first time by accident. For hundreds of years, traders from Spain and other European countries had traveled east to India, where they bought cloves, nutmeg, and pepper. But the long and difficult road to India lay through dry deserts and over steep mountain ridges. So an adventurer named Christopher Columbus set sail from Europe and went west, hoping to go all the way around the world and reach India from the other side. When he caught sight of land, he was sure that he had reached the islands near India. He named the people who came out to meet him Indians, and he claimed the land for Spain because the Queen of Spain had given him money to buy his ships. After Columbus returned home, other Spanish adventurers called conquistadores followed his sea route to, quote-unquote, India. They realized that Columbus hadn't reached India at all. He had found an entirely new land. And this new land held something more exciting than spices. The native people of South America wore gold jewelry. They offered the conquistadores gold and silver ornaments. And they told stories about a king called El Dorado, or in English, the Man of Gold, who was so rich that he wallowed in gold dust every day. When Philip II heard these stories, he decided that Spain needed this gold. So he granted Spanish conquistadores special contracts called encomiendas. The encomiendas gave the conquistadores permission to sail to South America and take all its gold. Of course, South America wasn't a big empty country filled with gold. Native South American tribes called Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas already lived there. But Philip II announced that Spain could claim South America because the tribes who lived there were not Christians. God has given all of the world to the Pope, one royal decree explained, and the Pope has given these new lands to the King of Spain. Not everyone in Spain agreed that God wanted Spain to have South America's gold. Many Christian priests preached sermons against Philip's encomiendas. But the conquistadores ignored these priests. At first, they took jewelry away from the native tribes. Then they learned that bits of gold were mixed into the sand of the cold mountain streams. So they began to pan gold out of these streams. They crouched over the icy water with metal pans and dipped the pans down into the sand beneath the stream's surface, filling them about half full. Then they held the pans in the current, letting water run over the sand while they shook the pans gently up and down. The rushing water washed the sand out while the heavy gold sank to the bottom. But panning for gold didn't make the conquistadores rich enough. So the Spanish began to dig mines into the ground, looking for a rock called quartz that often has little lines of gold running through it. Miners hacked quartz out of the mines with iron axes, carried the rocks up to the surface, crushed them into powder, and heated the powder over a fire. The gold melted and ran off into molds, where it hardened into coins or gold bars called ingots. The mines started to pour out gold, and silver as well. In all, the Spanish took $500 billion worth of gold and silver out of South America. Think for a moment about the number 5 billion. If you count day and night, it would take you 150 years to count to 5 billion. And if you could lay 5 billion pennies side by side, you would have a line of pennies that wrapped all the way around the earth more than 7 times. Now imagine 100 times as many. It would take you 15,000 years to count to 500 billion, counting day and night. And your line of 500 billion pennies would wrap around the earth over 700 times. If you had $500 billion, you could buy a 10-speed bicycle for every single person in the world. Spanish law declared that the king got a share of every load of gold brought from the New World. South American gold made Philip II the richest king in the world, and his people prospered too. Thousands and thousands of poor Spanish men and women traveled to South America and grew rich. "God has given me silver," one Spanish settler wrote home from South America. "I am rich and honored here. Who would make me go back to Spain and live in poverty?" So many Spanish came to South America that parts of the continent became known as New Spain. But while the Spanish prospered, the native South Americans suffered. The Spanish forced them to work long, miserable hours mining gold. Men spent months in the damp darkness of the mines. Women panned for gold and pounded quartz into powder. Even children spent their days gathering rocks and carrying them up to the surface of the mines. And the Spanish also brought slaves from Africa to work in the South American mines. Working hard, eating little, catching diseases from the conquistadores, thousands of Africans and native South Americans grew sick and died. Dead slaves are buried every day in big piles. One Spanish onlooker wrote home, "South American gold brought riches and power to Spain and to Philip, but it brought misery to South America."